Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. We are officially at the end of 2024, and as every other podcast on the planet is doing, it is time to look back at the best that this past year had to offer. Just like last year, we are holding a bit of an award show through this episode of All Things Nintendo. That is right. This is the 4th annual All Things Nintendo Awards. To celebrate, I've brought back one of my favorite debuting guests of 2024. You know him from his work on IGN, the Nintendo Voice Chat podcast, and the Toadstool Boardroom podcast. It's Logan Plant. Logan, how are you doing?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on for your awards show. I love end-of-year awards discussions, so this will be fun.
All right. Well, I'm very much looking forward to this. You know, you came on the show a couple of times this year, and the listening community of All Things Nintendo was very excited to have you come on the show. I got to do Toadstool Boardroom podcast once a couple weeks ago, and I'm enjoying these crossover episodes that we're doing here.
Yes, me too.
How was your year? How was your 2024? Let's start there.
It was great. Yeah, I think it was a really fun year. I think that obviously mostly on the Nintendo beat, that's where I spent most of my time. I got my Switch year in review. The lion's share of my video game playtime was spent on Nintendo Switch, which I think was a rarity for a lot of people in the industry this year. But just being a Nintendo guy, I spent 550 or so hours on Nintendo Switch. Yeah, my most played game in April was Endless Ocean Luminous, which was the fun stat that I shared when I reviewed that one. And then I've played almost 100 hours of Super Mario Party Jamboree, and it's only been out for 2 months. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's been a good year, but I think like a lot of Nintendo fans just been looking ahead to next year as well, and just everything that they have in store for us is going to be a ton of fun.
Yes, and we will certainly get to talking a little bit about that on the tail end here. But I talked about this last week. I did my year in review, and it was like 2 of my top 3 games were just games I reviewed on Switch, because I did not play Switch that often. Like, even the games that I talked about on this podcast, oftentimes they were played on other platforms, like Sonic X Shadow Generations I played on PS5. Power Rangers Rita's Rewind played on PS5. And it's just like, okay, well, I can talk about these, but play them on these other systems. And it's funny because like TMNT Splintered Fate was 1, Balatro was 2, and Penny's Big Breakaway. So 2 of those 3 games I reviewed for Game Informer, Balatro being the only one I did not formally review, but I've reviewed it like 25 times on this podcast, so we don't need to talk too much more about that. But let's clarify what these awards are. So if a game came out in a previous year but came on Switch in 2024, that game does qualify.
Okay.
And here's how it's going to work. I'm going to list off the nominees for each category, and then I will announce the winner. I should have pulled them out of this, which is a Smash Brothers invite.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Video people can see that I have a Smash Brothers invite envelope. This was like an old school, like My Nintendo reward that they sent envelopes and stuff. I could also, we have props on this episode of All Things Nintendo. This was sent to me by Pokemon in this was last Pokemon Day. A bottle of sparkling apple juice.
Beautiful. Okay.
It says Pokemon. Celebrate Pokemon. So I have not opened this because I'm hesitant to open it. But if we were ever going to open it, it would definitely be during an award show, because that's when you pop bottles and sip on the bubbly, right?
Absolutely.
So once I announce the winner, Logan, you and I will briefly talk about that game and our thoughts on that category. But before we do head into these awards, I did want to briefly reflect on this year for Switch, which, it really felt like this was a transitional year for Nintendo. And we've all, just as you had indicated, we've been on pins and needles waiting for the Switch 2 to be revealed. Nintendo has given us little drops of information here and there. But despite that, I feel like Nintendo has had a surprisingly solid year, even though it feels like much of the A-team has moved on to Switch 2 development. We got games like Princess Peach Showtime, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership. All those, had varying degrees of success. Obviously, Super Mario Party Jamboree, a personal favorite of yours.
Yes.
But meanwhile, like I said, all the A teams seemingly are working on Switch 2 games, which is why I think that it's a surprise how solid 2024 really was. But that said, I think that I mean, my prediction is that 2025 is going to be one of the biggest years in recent memory for Nintendo because we're anticipating this new console, because all these other teams are presumably working on the next console's
Mhm.
games. Like I'm extremely confident we are going to get a 3D Mario in year one. So as we move into this next generation of Nintendo hardware, I think we do have a lot to be excited for. But unfortunately, as was the case with last year, 2024 also had a ton of hardships for game developers and also games media. I think this year was actually harder for games media than the year prior. And if you're listening to this podcast, I don't have to tell you how much I was affected by industry closures, but thousands upon thousands of layoffs continued hitting studios. And last year, I in this very episode last year, I warned that if this continued at this pace, it would do irreparable damage. And it unfortunately didn't just continue; it actually ramped up to greater numbers than before. So I just, if anybody who has the power to make a change in this industry, I implore you to look up better ways forward, because we absolutely need better ways forward. This is an industry that I love, that I know you love, Logan, and everybody listening to this podcast presumably loves. And we want to see what's best for this amazing hobby, this amazing, well, for some of us, career that we love so much. And I know that 2025 is something that I want to set forward is finding a sustainable way forward for games media. And I hope that there are people out there that are trying to do the same for finding a sustainable way for games developers as well.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that 2025 could be a better year for the industry as a whole than the last few have been. I think there's a lot of signs pointing to that, but I sadly don't know if we're done with all the layoffs yet. I worry about companies like Ubisoft and how much they
Mm.
are kind of betting on Assassin's Creed Shadows to save them. And I just hope that we don't see a ton more layoffs there or at other big companies across the industry. But yeah, there's a lot of big stuff on the calendar next year, apart from just Switch 2. There's a ton of huge games coming out to the other consoles that could hopefully ramp up some interest in the games industry again. And then on the media side, yeah, it's been a heartbreaking year to see just how many layoffs there have been, how many sites have shuttered, and just there's so few players left now. And yeah, it's a completely different landscape than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's radically transformed. And yeah, I hope that everybody out there can stay in this industry and find sustainable work.
For sure. Things have been, despite how many great games we've gotten these past couple of years, it has been pretty bleak on the games industry side of things. And,
Yeah.
so many of the talented developers whose work that we've enjoyed and celebrated on this very podcast, they're spending their holiday season looking for work, while a lot of the executives who put them in a lot of these no-win scenarios, like, I mean, there's a lot of accountability that is kind of being passed on to the people who didn't really have the power to make the decisions that ultimately ended up making these games not profitable. They're likely looking at a six-figure Christmas bonus, and it's just infuriating to see that shareholders are coming before the actual talent that creates the games that we absolutely love. And I really don't want this to be the case, but it feels like 2025 will be kind of do or die for both the games industry and games media. And like there just has to be a better path to sustainability.
Yeah.
Like this is the highest grossing entertainment industry on the planet. And like I'm so tired of everyone acting like we're some upstart industry that doesn't know what it's doing when we make
hmm
more money than any like movie or television or music industry. I know that we're still relatively young, but we've had enough time to mature, and it's time for especially the executives to start acting like it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, now that that's out of the way, let's look at 2024 from a more positive perspective. Logan, without going into too many specifics, give me just an overall assessment of the Switch in particular's 2024.
Yeah, I think you nailed it earlier when you said this is a transitional year for Nintendo. This is one last year was enormous. We got huge AAA first party stuff with Zelda, Mario, and Pikmin. We got a movie last year. We got a theme park opening last year. It was one of their biggest years ever. Next year's going to follow that up in a bigger way, and with a new console launch. You're totally right. New 3D Mario has to be coming. I think a new Mario Kart is probably coming with it too. We're getting a new Metroid game next year. Finally, Metroid Prime 4. Next year setting up huge, and that leaves 2024 is just kind of the stopgap in between, which is fine. I think it's completely natural and normal and acceptable for a console generation to kind of wax and wane. And this was one of the lower years that Switch has had. But even with that said, Nintendo published a video game every single month this year. That is
Yeah.
a crazy output that no other publisher is kind of able to match right now. And not all the games were my favorite. A lot of them were remasters. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I look at as that's kind of the wrong game at the right time, I guess. It's not what I wanted to see, but sure, it filled a hole that they needed to. And some of their new stuff was very, very good. Some of their new stuff was fine. Princess Peach Showtime, I think, was good and nothing more. So yeah, it was an up and down year, but I'm still impressed at their output of what they're able to do on Switch this year. With us all saying this is one of the worst years. Compare this to one of the worst years of the Wii U, and you'll see
Oh.
this year wins hands down. So yeah, it was fine, is what I would say.
I remember like the last year and a half to 2 years of the Wii U's life cycle. It was just a wasteland. They basically
Yeah.
had punted on the Wii U. They're like, nobody bought this thing. We need to start developing for this next console that eventually ended up being called the Nintendo Switch. And man, did it show. Like the 2017 and 2018 stretch that Nintendo had was like we got a new 3D Zelda and a new 3D Mario within a few months of each other.
Yeah. Mhm.
Not only that, we got a Splatoon 2, we got a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which yes, it was a kind of an enhanced remaster of a Wii U game, but they fixed a lot of the problems, and then it's went on to become one of the best selling Nintendo games ever created.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously that was a huge success. And then everything in between, like that stretch was so phenomenal.
Mhm.
If we can even get a shade of that going into 2025, like we are in for a
Yeah.
treat over like these next 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun, and I can't wait to see what they have because there's going to be surprises too. There's probably going to be a new IP. There's going to be a ton of cool stuff that they've been cooking in Kyoto. I can't wait to see what it is.
Absolutely. So, Logan, without further ado, I say let's get started with these
Let's do it.
awards. The first category is Best Strategy or Simulation Game. So we have Endless Ocean Luminous, Metal Slug Tactics, Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic, SteamWorld Heist 2, and Unicorn Overlord. And the winner is Metal Slug Tactics. All right. So, how did you get a chance to play Metal Slug Tactics? We'll start there.
I haven't yet. My biggest experience with Metal Slug Tactics is you talked about it last time I was on this show, and it sounded awesome. So yeah, this is not a surprising winner pick for me.
Yes, it was such a fun game with like an IP that I loved playing growing up. It's an unlikely melding of genres. Like it's very cool to see them take like new spins and new twists on what I would describe as very XCOM esque, kind of XCOM meets Into the Breach style
Mm-hmm.
gameplay, and adding the different abilities that the various characters from the Metal Slug IP have, and making it so that you can jump into vehicles, which is a very cool twist on a lot of the turn-based strategy games,
Yeah.
and a charming pixel art style. I mean, shameless plug here, a soundtrack, a fantastic soundtrack by the same guy who does the All Things Nintendo's theme song, Tee Lopes, and just an extremely solid and incredible strategy experience from start to finish. So I did struggle a little bit with this one because I
Mhm.
love SteamWorld Heist 2. Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic, I talked about that, and it has some shortcomings that kind of prevented me from fully enjoying that version on Switch. But and obviously Unicorn Overlord is a great game in its own right, but ultimately I had to go with Metal Slug Tactics. It was the game on this list that I put the most amount of time into, and I think I got by far the most enjoyment out of.
Cool. It was in your top three on Switch, right? You're in your playtime.
No, no, no. It was
Oh,
I
that
think
one wasn't.
number
Okay.
4 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah, because Penny's Big Breakaway and
Gotcha.
TMNT Splintered
Mhm.
Fate are games that I reviewed, and those got a little bit extra time because I was actually
Yeah.
reviewing
Mhm.
them for Game Informer back when we were open.
Mhm.
But all right, it's time to move on to the next award here that we have on the docket, and it's a big one. It's Best Action Game. So here are the nominees: Bo, Path of the Teal Lotus, Contra, Operation Galuga, The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, Sonic X Shadow Generations, and Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. And the winner is Sonic X Shadow Generations.
That's the right pick. That is the right winner. Oh my gosh, this game is so awesome. I didn't play it on Switch either. Well, I actually did. Sega sent me a code to try it out. It runs great on Switch. It's actually, you can really recommend the Switch version of this game. It's at 30 FPS instead of 60, but that's pretty much the only shortcoming. And yeah, we're both huge Sonic fans. This was such a treat this year.
Yeah, I mean, Sonic Generations came out in 2011. Great game. I think it has aged a little bit in an unfavorable way in the time
Mhm.
since. It's 13 years old at this point, and level design conventions and game design conventions have changed quite a bit in that time, especially with regards to modern Sonic levels.
Yeah.
But even going back and playing the Sonic Generations as it was in 2011 through this package that they sold us, you still kind of see like, oh, this is when they started figuring out how to implement that classic, uh, not for lack of a better word, the the more traditional branching pathways in a
Yeah.
modern Sonic level. Because for a while it was just like, okay, well, if you don't get you don't make the jump, you just fall into a death pit.
Hmm.
And Sonic Generations was the first one where it's like, okay, you missed the jump. You actually go down to the lower level and it's going to be more enemies, or it's going to be a bit slower, a bit more platforming intensive. And it really capitalizes on that. Speed is your reward for doing well in a Sonic game. And Sonic Generations, it looks amazing with modern visuals, modern kind of technology powering it. Obviously, the Switch is not at that smooth 60 FPS that
Yeah.
you get on PS5 and Xbox Series X. But then you go over to the much better half, which I did not expect to say, Shadow Generations, which is essentially what they did with Nintendo with Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, where it's like, okay, here's this game that's awesome. We're just going to bring that forward, some minor improvements. But then, you get over to Bowser's Fury, and it's this whole separate game that just uses like the engine and everything. And Shadow Generations is such a good modern Sonic game. It's wild to say that maybe the best modern Sonic game doesn't star Sonic.
I think that's true. I think that Shadow Generations is the best modern Sonic campaign there's ever been. It's just Sonic Generations for years since it came out has been my favorite Sonic game, and it's crazy that, like you were saying, in this package, I play Shadow Generations, and it just blows Sonic Generations out of the water. And Sonic Generations is still very fun, but the Shadow levels are just so well designed. They're the best designed levels since Sonic Generations, and they even outdo that one. And then I love how the camera is more zoomed out on Shadow, so you can kind of see the branching paths you need to hit, and you have time to kind of make those maneuvers. There's so many branching paths. The levels are long; they're 4 to 6 minutes, which is a perfect sweet spot for a modern Shadow level. And then I love the abilities he gets, like the Chaos Spears that he throws, or the
Mhm.
freezing time, which also stops the timer, which makes it really interesting for speedrunners to figure out. It's just they nailed it. It's awesome, and I hope they can carry this momentum forward to the next one.
And that's been what I've been saying about Sonic Team really since Sonic Frontiers, where it's like, okay, this is a great blueprint for everything
Yeah.
going forward. And that's how I feel about Shadow Generations as well. It's like, if they can really nail, which by the way, Shadow Generations does use the open zone format as well to, allow you to access these levels. If they can really take the lessons that they learned from Frontiers into Shadow Generations with how to design an open world style hub area,
Yeah.
because I do think they still are finding that sweet spot of exploration not being annoying and more like empowering.
Hmm.
Sonic Frontiers, there were definitely some growing pains that they had with that, but Shadow Generations was better, but still not quite where it needs to be for like the next full mainline Sonic title. But in terms of like the linear stages, they knocked it out of the park with
Yeah.
Shadow Generations. And I think the ones in Sonic Frontiers were also quite good for the most part. If they can figure out how to combine their efforts in both of those games, take all the lessons they learned and carry it forward, I think the Sonic franchise is looking extremely bright for its future.
Yeah, we're in a great spot, and it feels crazy to be able to say that. And then I saw Sonic 3 last night, Brian, and it's awesome. It's
Yes,
so
it is.
awesome. Yeah, it's just they're nailing everything right now. It's great to see.
You can go back to last week's episode of All Things Nintendo and hear our full review of Sonic 3 if you want to hear more about that. But Logan, we have the next category ready to go. It is Best RPG. So we have Cat Quest 3, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake, Fantasian Neo Dimension, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. And the winner is Fantasian Neo Dimension. So this is the game from Hironobu Sakaguchi's studio that, the creator of Final Fantasy, and he decided to basically make a Final Fantasy style game with his studio, and it came out on Apple Arcade several years ago. Finally decided to bring it to consoles and PC, and it is fantastic. They also implemented a better difficulty setting because the original was extremely hard, so they made that original mode hard mode, and then they had normal mode. Extremely gorgeous handcrafted dioramas as the backdrops, and just an all-around solid story with really great battle mechanics and cool takes on random encounters as well. Have you had a chance to play Fantasian in any of its forms?
I played it at a preview event at PAX West this year, and at the same preview event was Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, and it was a 2 hour window. I played Fantasian for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I played Dragon Quest for the other hour and a half, because my pick for this would have been Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. But from what I know about you, Brian, Final Fantasy, this seems like a perfect pick for this award.
Yeah, I do love me some Final Fantasy, and to have Sakaguchi coming in with another RPG banger, that is such a way to warm my heart. I mean, I
Yeah.
love Lost Odyssey. I've talked about that game on this podcast many times. It is a shame that that is just seemingly just stuck on the Xbox 360, even though it is backward compatible on Xbox Series X. If you want to play that, this is the same developer, same studio that did Lost Odyssey, Blue Dragon, and I
Mhm.
think a couple of others that they've done. I forget what the other ones were, but yeah, Hironobu Sakaguchi still apparently knows how to make a really good RPG, and it takes home the award for best RPG from All Things Nintendo in 2024. So that brings us to the next category. This is usually a hotly contested one, and I don't think this year is any different on a Nintendo console. Best platforming game. So
Mhm.
here we have Animal Well, Anton Blast, Freedom Planet 2, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Neva. And the winner is Animal Well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm totally on board with that choice. Animal Well was awesome. It's one of the coolest bite-sized experiences I played this year. There's a rabbit hole you can go down with Animal Well. I didn't. I played 5 or 6 hours, rolled the credits once, and called it good, but still just had a phenomenal time with it. I think it's really clever and very Nintendo in a lot of ways, in just how its environment teaches you how to proceed. And I always really appreciate how design can teach the player things without any actual text on screen, and Animal Well did that extremely well this year.
They really did. And, this is also notable because it was the first game published by Video Game Donkey's Big Mode.
Hmm.
And man, did he pick a winner. I remember playing this at SGF, Summer Game Fest, 3 years ago, I think it was. It was, I think, the first one where they did an in-person gathering out in LA.
Okay.
And they had one single room. Now it's ballooned into taking over an entire campus essentially. But I remember playing Animal Well just before it was even before Big Mode was even founded. So it was just a guy just showing it to me, And I was like, "Oh, this seems like a really cool game." And he's like, "Yeah, it's coming to, PC and Switch, I think is what it was at the time. And now I think it's on
On
everything."
everything, yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, and I was like, "Man, this seems so cool." And I played it for like probably 30 minutes, and I was like, "Well, I can't wait for that to come out maybe next year." And then fast forward 3 years, and it finally came out. Absolutely phenomenal title, and I'm so happy that I had a chance to play it. And it's one of the better games this year, and very deserving of getting the best platforming game award from this podcast.
Not many platformers from Nintendo this year. They didn't really.
Mm-mm.
Mario versus Donkey Kong, I think, was the one in there that you had nominated. Yeah, yeah, rough year for them platformer wise.
Not usually the case.
Yeah,
Yeah,
surprising. And
usually
next year we already
Nintendo
know
dominates that.
we got Donkey Kong next year, early next year, so that'll probably be on this list next year.
Very excited for that. I mean, the platforming game or the platforming genre was dominated by Astrobot over on PlayStation,
Yeah.
which is not something you hear often. And I mean, Astrobot is one of my favorite games overall in 2024. I think that it is a game that is on par with the creativity that we typically see, and the level design and everything, the cleverness, everything is on par with what we usually get from a 3D Mario game.
I have a different take on that, but that might be for
Wow.
another time. I don't know if you want to get into that now.
I don't think we need to, because we have
Okay.
another category to get into, and that is best indie game. Another this would actually be maybe the hardest one to pick,
Yeah.
because it was such an incredible year for indies. I think that that was the headline for me. I mean, yes, there were huge games: Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor Refantasio, which, by the way, I saw IGN awarded Game of the Year. I'm very excited
Yes.
for that team. As many people know, I spent a week out in Tokyo with Atlas and Studio Zero to do an in-depth story about Metaphor Refantasio ahead of launch. And so I developed a pretty good relationship with Hashino-san and Soejima-san. Got to see them out at the Game Awards a couple weeks ago, and it was great to say hi to them. And I'm really happy for them and having all the success, because in talking with Hashino, he told me that he was like 70% anxious and 30% excited for this game to come out, because he's like, this is the first time I've really done an RPG that
Yeah.
isn't called Persona in a while. And
Yeah,
he's
it's
like,
very different. Yeah.
yeah, he was concerned how it was going to take. And I'm really happy for him that, it ended up panning out and being as
Mhm.
good as it was. But we're going to go to best indie game. And like I said, hotly contested category. The nominees are Thousand X Resist, Animal Well, Balatro, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and Nine Souls. And the winner is Balatro. I mean, knowing me, there was no way that anything else was going to win this category. But man, when I was putting together the nominees, it was even hard to trim down to five, because there were so many great indie games that came out this year. Were there any that you wanted to shout out that weren't on that nomination list?
No, I think that the main ones that I played are on there. Nine Souls specifically is one that's really been taking off later in the year in popularity. It's on Xbox Game Pass. It's very Hollow Knight like, so I think that a lot of people have picked it up and played it there. But Balatro was one of the biggest stories of this year. It was a huge, huge game. I played it. Extremely impressed with it. Haven't quite gotten sucked into it like I know a lot of people have. I won a few hands, and then I kind of just decided to put it down and not try and go for all the stakes, because there's so much other stuff to play. But I respect the heck out of that game. It's so well designed and so stylish and just incredibly cool.
I told this story last week, but I was on my way to the Game Awards, and I was like, okay, well, I'm on my flight. I have my Switch. I charged it overnight, and I took it out to play Balatro, and it was at 13%. The battery was, because my Switch is just basically dead at this point. It's a launch model, so the battery is almost non-existent. I
Mhm.
made the joke that it's basically like, there's the Switch Lite that is only handheld. I basically have the only like TV version of the Switch
Yeah.
at this point. So
Mhm.
I'm just holding out for the Switch 2.
Yeah.
But my saving grace to this point was that I didn't have Balatro on my phone, so there was a little bit of a barrier. It wasn't like, oh, I could just pull out my phone and play Balatro whenever I want.
Mhm.
I had to get my Switch out of the case and have my Switch with me in the first place because I don't take it everywhere. I just take it on trips and stuff.
Yeah.
But now I'm doomed because I that forced me to use the plain Wi-Fi to download Balatro, and now I've been playing on my
Mhm.
phone, and it's over. It's over for me.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'll see you next year. Maybe you'll be playing some other stuff finally.
Hopefully. I mean, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But yeah, Balatro, you've heard my review of that game so many times on this podcast. It was great to hear your take on that, Logan, because
Mhm.
Lord knows the listeners are sick of hearing me rant and rave about it. But here we go, starting to ramp up in the intensity of these categories. We are at Best Multiplayer Game. And the
Okay.
nominees are Contra Operation Galuga, Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate. And the winner is Super Mario Party Jamboree.
Oh, good, good. I was nervous. I didn't know. My two babies were in this category with Mario Party and Monkey Ball. I love them both so much.
So
Awesome
do I.
multiplayer, and yeah, I voted for on our Game of the Year ballot. I voted for Super Mario Party Jamboree for the best multiplayer. I just think it's such a fun party game. You can play it with the pro mode with people who are super into Nintendo games and Mario Party and have a really competitive time, or we just had some friends over and just played a really casual game where no one's even really paying attention. You're just hanging out, having a couple drinks, playing Mario Party. It's really flexible in that way. And yeah, I mean, I already said I played it for 100 hours this year, and pretty much all of that has been in multiplayer, and it's just been an awesome time.
It's just a fantastic experience. Mario Party in general is always one of the better just multiplayer experiences and casual gaming
Yeah.
experiences you can have. I think it's only really topped by Mario Kart in
Hmm.
terms of like casual appeal, where it's like, oh, I have friends over. Some of them are gamers, some of them not so much. I bet we could turn on Mario Party and have a great time. It's like
Yeah.
the holy trinity of like casual gaming experiences is like Mario Kart, Mario Party, and Jackbox. And
Hmm.
it's like maybe Overcooked has a claim to that throne as well. But I feel like Jackbox and Mario Party are the ones that I more often than not end up playing when I have a mixed company of gamers and non-gamers alike. Those are the ones that was like, okay, yeah, let's turn on a game console and play something.
Hmm.
And as you had indicated when you came on, this is one of, if not the best Mario Party games ever.
Hmm.
And it's reflected in the multiplayer modes. It's just a lot of fun. The mini games are great, and I am stoked that we got this game this late in the Switch life cycle.
Yeah. With really solid online too. We should shout out the online runs. If everyone has a good connection, of course, the online runs really well. And yeah, you can play a four-player game and it almost feels like everyone's just in the same room. So that's really impressive that's a big improvement over Superstars also.
For sure. And yeah, I was also very concerned when it was had that Super Mario Party name because I was not a big fan
Mhm.
of Super Mario Party. And I was like, oh no, they're gonna do a sequel to the lesser of the two
Yeah.
Switch Mario parties. And then it turned out to be great. So I'm glad that the my fears were for naught.
Yes.
All right, Logan, we are on to the next category. It is Best Compilation. So, this is one that I would say in recent years has been dominated by one particular studio. Digital Eclipse, I always sing their praises. They've done a great job putting out these compilations. But let's see what the nominees are in this category: Another Code Recollection, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy, Castlevania Dominus Collection, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, and Tetris Forever. And the winner is Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics. So you're nodding along. Does that mean you have checked this out?
I have checked it out. Yeah, it's cool. What a cool game to come out this year. It really blindsided a lot of people in the Nintendo Direct that it was revealed in, and just an awesome comeback story, and just a great compilation of awesome fighting games. And yeah, I'm a very casual fighting game player, but when a collection drops like this, a buddy of mine, we just like to jump in, try out every game that's in it for 20 or 30 minutes, and then maybe never touch it again. But it's just a really cool look into a bunch of classic games that I've never really played before. So yeah, this is an awesome one.
Yeah, one of the most beloved fighting franchises, and it's been dormant for a really long time. We unfortunately got Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite a few years ago, and it seemed to really kill the franchise.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
now we have Maximilian Dude out here doing an extensive mod for it, and like revamping Infinite's reputation with, I think it's called Infinite Beyond.
Oh, cool. I have not heard of that. That's
Yeah,
really
he
cool.
just launched it. I think this past week,
Okay,
and
nice.
basically you can go in and it redid all the art style. It added like new combos and abilities and everything. So if you have the PC version of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which I think is on sale pretty frequently because Capcom's not exactly pushing that game, you can go check that out. But getting back to this particular winning compilation, it seemed like Capcom completely forgot about this franchise after the failure of Infinite, maybe even lost the license. Like, I don't know if we have any reporting on whether or not they're even able to make another Marvel vs. Capcom game, because we've seen in the past that that has been in flux constantly. Like, it would come out on Xbox Live Arcade, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and then suddenly it's delisted because they lost the license. And then all of a sudden, Marvel Ultimate Alliance is back on the Xbox storefront, and then it's delisted. And then all the Marvel, the various Marvel like licensing is always kind of a tricky puzzle. I mean, that even extends up to their films, where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
Sony can make Spider-Man movies. They don't have Spider-Man themselves. They're loaning that to Marvel Studios. But then it came out a couple weeks ago that Sony can use Spider-Man whenever they want. They just chose not to. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, why would you choose not to? And instead just have, hey, let's do a movie about Morbius.
Yeah, Craven is more of a draw than Spider-Man, right? That's why they didn't use him.
Yeah, exactly. That
Yeah.
everybody bought Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation 5 because of Craven, not because of
Yeah.
Spider-Man and Venom.
Yeah.
But yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, it's a terrific way to honor the classic games of this. It stops after Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but it goes all the way back to the X-Men fighting game, all the way up to Marvel superheroes, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Street Fighter, and then the first Marvel versus Capcom games, and then you're just cooking with gas at that point. Just
Mhm.
incredible titles. I still play these games every single time I go to my local arcade bar. It's
Cool.
like I have like a lap that I do where it's like, okay, I got to play Turtles in Time, I got to play the X-Men arcade game, and I've got to play Street Fighter 2. But eventually, I am going to make my way to that Marvel vs. Capcom cabinet. I have a Marvel vs. Capcom arcade one up from a couple
Oh,
of years
cool.
ago, because that was the only way you could play these games at home. And now it's so much nicer to just be able to fire up my Switch and play these
Yeah.
games.
Mhm.
And they run great, they look great. And, it's cool that they can tell you exactly what ROM version that they're using. Like, they went in depth with like making sure this was as close to arcade perfect as possible on a, multi-platform console release.
I do have to give a shout out to some of the other nominees. I think Another
Mhm.
Code was a really nice surprise this year, a franchise no one expected to come back that did, and that was cool. And then you mentioned the Ace Attorney Apollo Justice trilogy. There was another Ace Attorney compilation that came out this year, the Ace Attorney Investigations collection, and I think it's cheating, but those combined are my favorite of the year, just because the Miles Edgeworth Investigations collection brought over the last remaining Japan only Ace Attorney that was never localized here, and like 15 years later to finally see that come into English and go on Switch and these other platforms was such a shock and such an awesome thing that Capcom also did this year.
Yeah, for sure. All of those nominees and also the investigations collection. I had to choose one
Yeah.
just to like, otherwise it's like, okay, we're taking up two of the five. That's 40%
Yeah.
of the nominees with these Ace Attorney games. And then we also have Marvel versus Capcom. So that means Capcom would have had 60% of the
Yeah. Yeah.
nominees. And we had to tamp down a little bit there.
Mhm.
But congratulations to Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics. Hopefully, this means that there are signs of life for this franchise, because when done right, it's a really special franchise. And I think that Capcom has finally figured out how to make a I mean, this sounds crazy to say. They've refigured out how to make great fighting games. Street Fighter 6, look
Mhm.
no further, but like, Street Fighter 5 was a difficult experience for them, as was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Both of those games came out in the same era. I think they kind of lost their way. I mean, also right before that was uh, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which was also a bit of a
Oh, yeah.
flop,
Mhm.
but it seems like they've really found their way with Street Fighter 6. And I hope, I mean, even give it to, Nakayama and Matsumoto, the director and producer of Street Fighter 6. Let them see what they can do with Marvel vs. Capcom. Even though from my discussions with the team, it seems like they might be more DC guys than Marvel guys.
Oh, okay,
So it's
interesting.
interesting to note that. But they also have a lot of love for Marvel vs. Capcom. I think Matsumoto, who was the producer on Street Fighter 6, and he was, him and Nakayama were the two people responsible for writing the ship in 5, and then they got to make their own game with 6. I think Matsumoto is also the producer of this collection, the Marvel vs. Capcom
Mm.
collection, and he's talked about like, hey, we would love to do another thing with this game or with this franchise. So maybe this will be like the proof is in the pudding with like if this game sold well and it performed well and they can make a good collection, that means that maybe they can try something new in the next several years with this franchise. So fingers crossed the fact that this turned out so well bodes well for the future of the franchise. But Logan, it's time to move on to the next category: best remake or remaster. So this was a very difficult category as
There's a lot
well.
of them this year.
There were a
There's
lot of them, but
Nintendo's
we
got
narrowed it
so
down to
many.
5. So we have Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, Fantasia Neo Dimension, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And the winner is Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake.
Very nice choice.
So you may be saying, wait, that was nominated in the best RPG category, but it didn't win over Fantasian. I think that Fantasian is maybe a better RPG in 2024, but in terms of like the effort that was put in to remake Dragon Quest III with this gorgeous HD 2D aesthetic, I think that puts it over in terms of the remake category. And I mean, and as you had indicated, that was your pick for best RPG on Switch this year. So
Mhm.
it's not like it's any kind of slouch. But also, 3 of these games, it really is indicative of Nintendo's 2024, because 3 of these games in the remake or remaster category are
Yeah.
Nintendo published games, being Luigi's Mansion, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Paper Mario. But yeah, Paper Mario is probably my favorite of those 3 that Nintendo
Me
published. But
too.
ultimately, I think Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake is the clear choice here.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best remakes I've ever played. Not because it's one of the best games I've ever played, but just like you said, the effort is amazing. And the way that they modernized an NES RPG, but it still feels like an NES RPG, is just really cool. And you can turn off objective markers. So you can play it like the old NES one played, where you just talk to townsfolk and figured out where to go next. Or you can have these really clear, concise circles on the map that tell you exactly where to go. And I've been likening it to, it's like a tour guide is taking you through a 1980s video game. And it's just really, really well done. And I love the battle system. I love the HD 2D sprites for the enemies specifically. They are just bursting with personality. And playing it, I just couldn't help but think about all the other games I want to get remade in this style. An Earthbound remake like this, where it still feels like Earthbound, but there's all these little modern touches that just make it more approachable for a modern audience to play. Yeah, they nailed it. And I'm very excited for 1 and 2 next year in this same
Yeah.
style, because if it's up to this same bar of quality, that's going to be one of the best remakes of next year too.
Yes, it sure is. And it's always interesting to me to look at the divergent approaches that Square Enix is taking with its remakes. So you look at something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it has
Yeah.
remake in the title, just like Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake has remake in the title. But man, did they do completely opposite approaches where, the HD 2D remake style, I think, is a better fit for like an NES RPG. But at the same time, they could have, if they really wanted to invest this much time and money and resources into remaking Dragon Quest III in the style of Final Fantasy VII Remake, they could have done that. But instead, they decided to play to the strengths, do a little bit less time and budget intensive version of this remake, and it turned out amazing. And
Yeah.
I've made no secret that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of 2024. Or Rebirth is one of my favorites of this
Mhm.
year, and Remake is also phenomenal. But at the same time, I think that Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake is just a terrific remake and more than deserving of this honor on the podcast as well.
Yeah. And you already gave a shout out to Paper Mario, but I will too, because it didn't win either Best RPG or Best Remake, but it's right there. It is so, so phenomenal.
It was the closest I came to giving it to something else in that remake category, but I was like,
Mhm.
in terms of like a remaster or remake, it's not as ambitious by
Yeah.
any stretch of the imagination as Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake. But all right, on to the next one. This is a tradition award that we do here on All Things Nintendo. It's called the Better Late Than Never Award. And that's because I have tracked in my history of following Nintendo Switch that games from other platforms tend to come to Switch years sometimes after other platforms. So this is a game that came to Switch a different year than it came to a different platform. So the nominees are Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown, Fantasia Neo Dimension, One Piece Odyssey, Slay the Princess the Pristine Cut, and Chia. And the winner is Slay the Princess the Pristine Cut.
Cool. I have not played this, but Reb Valentine on Nintendo Voice Chat was recently singing its praises, and it sounds like a really interesting game.
It is one of the most, I mean, probably the most interesting visual novel I've ever played. Granted, I have not been the most experienced like adventure visual novel gamer in my life,
Hmm.
but the core concept of this being a time loop game where you make choices, narrative and otherwise decisions, and based on your decisions, it you loop back, and you're the only one who has memory of what is going on in this time loop. The narrator, who will interact with you, and you can ask him questions and everything, he doesn't even know about the time loop. You have to fill him in, and there are so many amazing moments that take place over the course of the narrative of this game. And finding out like kind of the puzzles of how to quote unquote win and progress to the next like stage of the story is so satisfying. And there's so many bonkers moments where I'm just like watching with my mouth wide open, like, what is happening right now? And it's such a simple art style and such a simple idea of just like, okay, there's this princess who is chained to a wall in a basement in the middle of the woods. You just need to go in there and kill her, and that is like the main concept. But then like you get there and you're like, all right, well, why am I listening to this like disembodied voice? Like, should I set her free instead? And like all you know is, if you don't kill her, the world will end. That's all the narrator really tells you. And you're like, well, what is that? How does that mean? Or like, how is she going to do that? And he's just like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, just do it. Trust me. If you don't kill this princess, the world is going to end. And it goes some really cool places with that. And, you can affect the way future loops play out based on your decisions. It is one of my favorite games of this year. Even though it came out on PC last year, I did not play it. I was waiting for a console release. The Pristine Cut, which is the one that we're celebrating here, that's the version that came to Switch and the other consoles. It adds a bunch of new dialogue options. It adds new content. It adds all kinds of new scenes that you can experience that weren't in the original version. So it is a fantastic way to not only bring it to consoles, but also bring the definitive version to consoles. And I believe this version is also on PC as well. So outstanding game that I think a lot of people maybe slept on because it looks fairly unassuming, but it's well worth playing if what I described sounds up your alley.
Very cool.
All right, we are coming up to it. This is the most wanted game for Switch in 2025. This category is kind of a piggybacking off of that last category. This is a series, or a lot of it is like games that have been released on other platforms that we want to see come to Switch. And now this is kind of a weird category this year because we'll take Switch 2 if
Yeah.
that is if that if it ends up being that. We already know Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible, so just bring it to either one and we'll be happy. So here are the nominees for most wanted game for Switch in 2025. Hades 2, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker / Twilight Princess HD, which I think has won the past 2 years.
Oh no.
At least it won last year.
Mhm.
Metaphor Refantazio, Mini Shoot Adventures, and Super Mario Galaxy 2. And the winner is Metaphor Refantazio.
Nice. What a sad category. Just all those awesome games that aren't on Switch yet. Yeah, those are all great choices. Metaphor makes so much sense. Yeah, I played it on PS5. It's awesome. It's amazing, and it'd be right at home on Switch.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it took me forever. I think the first year I did this in 2021, Persona 5 won this award, if I'm not mistaken. And then eventually that did come to Switch, and I was so happy. And yes, it is a perfect fit. And now the next game from those same developers is, winning the award this year. And this was another hotly contested category because we've all been really wanting Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD to come to Switch. Hades 2, yes, it's an early access game, so it's not expected to be on Switch in 2024. It's not on any platform other than PC,
Hmm.
but that Switch is such a great platform for Hades 1 that it would make sense to have Hades 2 come to Switch eventually. Mini Shoot Adventures, I have consistently said that if this game was on anything beyond Steam, it would be on everybody's top 10 games of the year. It's on my top 10 games of the year. And, I played it on Steam. I'm not even a big PC gamer. And I played it on Steam and on Steam Deck because I love that game so much. And obviously, Super Mario Galaxy 2. Why was that not
Hmm.
part of Mario 3D All Stars? We will never know. But Metaphor Refantazio, we've talked about how great of an RPG this is. It won Best RPG at the Game Awards. It won both IGN and GameSpot's Game of the Year. And it is a game that I played 10 hours prior to release of this game and then have put about 35 hours. So I've not played all the way through, but it's made it so I know that this is a truly special RPG and it would be so good on Switch. It has that same kind of like calendar style format that you get in the Persona games that makes it so great for bite-sized gaming. If you want to sit down and play this for 6 hours at a time, you can. If you want to sit down and play this for 30 minutes, you can do it that way as well. I know you could play this on Steam Deck, so it kind of has defeated the purpose of, oh man, the idea of having this on the go is so enticing. But the idea of having this on my Switch, along with all the other games that I want to have on the
Yeah.
go,
Mhm.
is just, it would blow me away to have this on my Switch. And hopefully it does come to Switch too.
Yeah. And Mini Shoot Adventures is another one that I'm totally with you on because I know I would love it if I'd played it, but I haven't because it's only on PC and I just don't play games on PC. I think the one of the only things I played on PC this year was UFO 50, another game I would
Oh,
love to
yeah.
see on Nintendo Switch. And yeah, that was a rare case where there's a game that interests me so much I have to log into my dusty Steam account to try it out.
Yeah, I need to get around to not mini shoot, UFO 50.
Yeah,
I bought it the other day on Steam, but now I'm just like, oh man, I should just waited for it to come to Switch because there's no way it doesn't
it will.
come
Yeah.
to other platforms. Like it's crazy that it didn't launch day and date with that.
Hmm.
But all right, we are coming down to the wire here, Logan. We are at one of the ultimate awards here. It is the best third party game on Nintendo Switch. Here are the nominees: 1000X Resist, Animal Well, Balatro, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and Sonic X Shadow Generations. And the winner is Balatro.
Nice, very nice.
You had to see that coming, even though, I mean, Sonic X Shadow Generations, maybe knowing my love for Sonic, people thought that that might sneak out the win here. Obviously, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is a terrific game that adds an entire second story into an already long RPG. But at the end of the day, it had to be Balatro. It's just one of those games that has rewired my brain into how much I love deck builders. Like, it's making me want to go back and play all these other deck builders that I've missed. I want to go back because I tried Slay the Spire when it
Yeah.
first came out and I bounced off of it. And now I'm just like, because I
Oh,
was like,
you
oh,
would love it now. You
I
would
know now that
totally
it's
love
rewired my brain, and I'm like
it.
all
Yeah.
about building decks. I mean, because it also, like, games like Marvel Snap and Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket have like really started scratching that itch as well. So
Mhm.
now I'm like, oh man, I need to go back and play Slay the Spire. So I re-downloaded it, and I do have plans to check it out during my break that I'm taking for the holidays here. And I will have to report back if I do in fact check that game out. But yeah, Balatro, it it contended for my overall game of the year, and that is completely unexpected. You may go back and listen to the initial episode of All Things Nintendo. I think it was Alex Van Aken who came on this podcast and shared why Balatro is such a great game. And I was kind of skeptical, and then I downloaded it after that episode, and I'm like, oh, I see why.
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah.
that's a great pick. I have to ask though, I've noticed one thing missing from some of these nominations. Have you played Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown?
Ooh, that is a good call out. I've played it, and I even played it on Switch. So yeah, I
Mhm.
probably should have included that as a nomination in some of these categories. You were correct.
That's just one of my favorites of the year, like platforming and third party. It's one of my favorite games of one of the best Metroidvanias ever made, I think. It's just awesome.
True. Yep. Very good call out there. I have failed you all. I will now
No.
proceed to smash my head into the wall repeatedly. Uh,
Just had
for
to give it a shout out, and I don't it's fine I didn't make the nominations. I just wanted to know if you'd played it because if not, you were in for a treat.
Yes, I did play. I started it. I mean, I got
Okay. Mhm.
several hours deep into it, but I had
Yeah,
to fall off for something else. I
that's
think it
fair.
might have been Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth that I jumped over to.
It's always
Which,
hard with these awards to kind of take your brain back to January. This game came out on January 15th or something like that. It's
yeah,
it's really, really far back there.
I honestly forgot that game came out this year, which,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's fair.
unfortunate. But I still stand by the winners at the very
Mhm.
least. Like, I
Yeah.
think from a personal perspective, and this is my podcast, I enjoyed Sonic X Shadow Generations, so it would have beaten Prince of Persia: The Lost
Mhm.
Crown in the action category.
Mhm.
And I think Balatro would have beaten it in the third party category. So yes, it's fantastic, but
Mhm.
just pretend it was a six nominee in those categories, because yes, I should have had
That's
that in
fair.
there. Uh, this is not the Game Awards level production values, we'll say, in case you haven't noticed by the fact that I'm recording this in my basement.
Hey, I
But
think
all
it's
right,
great.
we're here. It is the final award of the show. Logan, it is the Best Nintendo Game Award. Now, in past years, this is kind of served as like the game of the year, because usually when Nintendo releases a game on its console, it is the best game on that console. But I actually think Balatro is my overall pick for game of the year. But nonetheless, we have 5 nominees for Best Nintendo Game. We have The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario Luigi Brothership, Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Super Mario Party Jamboree. And the winner is Super Mario Party Jamboree.
Yeah, great choice. Awesome. That's the right call, Brian. Very, very nice.
The only one that really like got me thinking maybe I should give it to this other one is Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Shout out to that. That is an honorable mention because it is a creative new take on the Zelda franchise. It's great to be able to play as Princess Zelda, but there was something that just wasn't quite up to par with what we come to expect from a Zelda game, in my opinion. Meanwhile, as you have said a few times on this podcast, Logan, Super Mario Party Jamboree is among the greatest Mario Party games. One of the pinnacle franchises that Nintendo has. Yes, it's a divisive franchise overall, but this
Mhm.
one is the best one of the bunch, and it takes home this award in what I would say is kind of a lukewarm year for Nintendo published titles. But do you have anything else you'd like to say about this game from an overall standpoint? It already won best multiplayer, so we've covered the
Mhm.
multiplayer. But talk to me about the boards and the mini games.
Yeah, the boards and the mini games are amazing. I'm still not tired of them after so many games because I feel like every board just does something so different. So you can kind of pick what kind of game you want to play and select your board based on that. And then the mini games are really, really solid too. I do wish still there were just a few more of them in the main rotation because you've kind of seen them all. But there's some all-time classics in here, like the one where you have to take a picture that exactly matches the picture that's provided to you in this park. That is an all-time classic that when we're voting for mini games instead of the random selection, all four people pick that one every single time. Like there's just some really, really solid stuff in there. The character roster is huge. And I think something that has really stuck with me about it is just how good it looks and how well it runs, which is something you can't say about a lot of Nintendo games this year. Zelda had a lot of performance issues that I think held that game back, but the devs at Nintendo Cube have just really figured out the Switch, and this Mario Party game is gorgeous. And yeah, it's a deserving winner. And I'm with you on Zelda. It won IGN's Best Nintendo Game of the Year award. I voted for Mario Party. It was a runner up. But Zelda was really, really fun. But I agree, it's just missing something that a lot of Zelda games have. It's just not quite as polished or as intentional feeling as most Zelda games feel, which is fine. They took a big swing with this new mechanic. It didn't fully land, but I'm still glad that Echoes of Wisdom exists and it's a very, very good game. But Mario Party takes it. It was the king of the Nintendo lineup this year.
Absolutely. So, congratulations to Nintendo Cube for taking home this extremely prestigious award from the All Things Nintendo podcast. Logan, how would you grade? Like, let's do a letter grade of Nintendo's 2024 overall. That can include like just any games that came to Switch in 2024, their overall like publishing year. Like, give me a letter grade here.
Oh, it's tough because if I think about it in context of where the Switch is at, or just in a vacuum, this is the year on paper, they're different grades. So just on paper, this year, I don't know, a C plus, a
That's
B
exactly
minus.
where I
Yeah.
landed.
Okay, cool.
C plus. There were some, pretty solid Nintendo published games. Nothing that is like on the level of Tears of the Kingdom or even Mario Wonder for that matter.
Mhm.
But yeah, some solid stuff. I think that the indies really carried Switch in 2024, and that bore out in my year in review.
Mhm.
Those were my most played games on the Switch this year. But yeah, C plus I think sounds about right. What's your outlook for Nintendo in 2025?
Very incredibly excited to get it rolling. And these Switch case leaks are going off the hook right now of
Oh yeah,
manufacturers claiming they know what this thing looks like. We know we're 3 months at most away from Nintendo actually telling us what this thing is with the Switch successor. Metroid Prime 4 is on the calendar, even removed from all the next gen stuff. That's a Switch game and it's finally coming. It's 8 years after it was initially announced. Next year is going to be awesome. And I think that I loved Mario Party this year. No shade at Mario Party, right? We've gushed about it. But next year there will hopefully be 3 or 4 Nintendo games better than the winner this year for the best Nintendo game, and that is a very exciting place to be. And I think it's just going to be a big year for Nintendo fans because this year we saw it in engagement of Nintendo content. People really cared about clicking on Switch 2 stuff, and the games not as much. There just wasn't that much interest this year, and next year that is going to be a very different story. It could be another 2017, and that I don't say that lightly. That's a big statement to throw around for Nintendo, but next year legitimately could be that, and I just can't wait.
Yeah, like we said, 3D Mario is on the table. New Mario Kart is on the table. Um, we know about Metroid Prime. We know about Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, which is a game I'm very excited for. Like
Me too.
I've been bummed that that's been trapped on the Wii and 3DS for
Mhm.
several years now. So to have it come to modern consoles and basically have the entire Donkey Kong Country saga available on Switch as of January next year, that's extremely exciting. Also, Pokemon Legends ZA is coming next
Yeah.
year,
Mhm.
which I think Pokemon Legends is the best Pokemon game since Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's very exciting to have a successor to that. And it would be cool if that ended up being like the future of the Pokemon franchise. Like I don't want to see like the RPGs like Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet go away completely, but I really enjoyed Legends Arceus, and to have Legends ZA continue on that style is extremely exciting, and I can't wait for that. Next week, we're going to be talking all about the most anticipated games and announcements for 2025. So we'll save some of that chat for this episode next week. But in case you're wondering what's going on the other side of the Patreon fence, this week on All Things Gamers, But Why Those, editor in chief Kate Sanchez joined me to discuss our favorite gaming related holiday presents we've ever received. And then we took some submissions from the All Things Nintendo community on their favorite holiday gifts related to stories surrounding games. You can find that podcast on the $10 tier of All Things Nintendo. Logan, do you have a favorite holiday gift that is related to gaming that you've ever received?
Oh man, let me try and think about that on the spot. I probably was just my Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds 3DS XL was a Christmas gift that I got the year that that game came out, and yeah, I just remember playing Link Between Worlds all day that Christmas day, and it's still one of my favorite games of all time.
One of the greatest and most underappreciated Zelda games ever
Mhm.
created. It has a legitimate claim to being the best 2D Zelda game.
Yeah, I think it is. And that is another reason particularly that Echoes of Wisdom didn't land as much because this is the first new single player one since that. And so
Mhm.
just following up on A Link Between Worlds and then just not quite recapturing that same spirit just made it not rank quite as highly.
Agreed. But I would love to see Link Between Worlds come to Switch in
Yes,
some
please.
capacity. But Logan, that wraps up this episode of All Things Nintendo. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun and congrats to all the winners of this very prestigious awards show. It was a blast.
And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. As you know, the Patreon and its associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. You can also get in touch with me at Brian at allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea. That is also my YouTube channel name, and if you would subscribe to that channel, it would help the show out a lot. Logan, what do you have to plug on the way out?
Yeah, so I've pretty much moved all operations over to Blue Sky now. You can find me there at Logan J. Plant, and then you can catch me weekly on IGN's Nintendo Voice Chat, and then my own personal Nintendo show, Toadstool Boardroom, which Brian mentioned he's been on, and that is also on Blue Sky now at Toadstool Boardroom. We got a video show, we got audio on Spotify, everywhere you look, and yeah, check it out. We also awarded the best Nintendo game of 2024 on that show, and it may have been very similar to this show's pick, so go check out that episode.
Yeah, go find that. It's another fantastic Nintendo-focused show.
Thank
But
you.
that is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening and supporting throughout 2024. I hope you've had a great holiday. Take care. We'll see you in 2025. Before we close out this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a shout out to the $10 patrons to the podcast: Aaron Smith, Abdullah, Adam Scott, Elena R., Alec Acanino, Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chain Whippin, Chaps My Ass, Chris Callie, Colton Bredlow, Dan Norman, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joseph Jury, Joshua DeProy, Justin Childress, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Mad Genie Confused Koala, Marshall Thompson, Megan S., Nintendo 101, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Philip G. Cox, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Souza, Roger Reichart, Russell Sayer, Scott Matthews, Sir Phobos, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zach Marcus, Zachary Pliggy, and Zek Three Sword Sama. Thank you all so much for continuing to support this show. You help make episodes like this happen.